Hello everybody and welcome! Right after I uploaded and scheduled my last video on Kitten Space Agency, the developers released their own video highlighting for the first time actual gameplay in their space simulation game, showing off a mission from Earth orbit to lunar orbit and back again. So I guess I'll have to make another one. If you don't know, KSA is a sort of spiritual successor to Kerbal's space program since it and its ill-fated sequel were abandoned and sold off by publisher Take-Two last year. In fact, a lot of the original developers from KSP are now working on KSA at Studio Rocketworks, just without the Kerbal brand since that is now owned by a private investment firm. I did a video on all that, link is in the description. In this video, however, we are going to analyze what the developers showed us. The video was released on the YouTube channel of Rocketworks CEO Dean Hall and is roughly 15 minutes long. However, the actual gameplay portion is only just 6 minutes, the rest is introduction and explanation. But it should actually be 12 minutes since Dean says that they sped up the footage to double the normal speed. Before we dive into all the nifty details, a big thank you to everyone who helped push this channel past the 100,000 subscriber mark. I couldn't have done this without all of you actively commenting, liking and, most importantly, sharing my videos to increase this channel's reach. Next up, 200,000 I guess. Let's see if we have to wait another 10 years to reach that milestone. But seriously, if you are new here and you are interested in the development of Kitten Space Agency or in spaceflight or space simulation games in general, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss an update. And with that out of the way, let's start with the very first frame of the presented KSA gameplay. And I want to focus your attention to the bottom of the screen. Don't worry, this is not how it is going to look in the final product. It's all still a work in progress. But we can already see important elements of the flight UI. A Navball with a velocity indicator and values for pitch, yaw and roll. And it's already outdated because since that video was released, the developers posted an update to the Navball on the KSA Discord server. By the way, since a lot of people kept asking to the link of that Discord server, I'll put it also in the description. Velocity was moved to the left-hand side and we now have indicators for attitude adjustments. Yet another update shows off how the Navball can switch between different frames of reference. VLF for velocity frame in regards to prograde, retrograde, normal, anti-normal, inward and outward orientation. Then LVLH for local vertical, local horizontal, meaning orienting with the horizon of the planet or moon you're currently orbiting. ECL stands for ecliptic, which would orient the Navball to the plane of the current solar system. And you can orient your Navball so that it aligns its 0-degree marker, basically its center, with your maneuver node. This would serve a similar functionality as the maneuver indicator on the Navball on KSP, but maybe this makes it easier to find your maneuver orientation because you don't have to hunt for that marker, you just adjust your attitude until your Navball is centered. But all of those things are not yet in the released gameplay video. What we do have is a panel with a bunch of buttons. I'm going to explain them now and you can watch how they are being used throughout the mission depicted here. Maneuver will point your vehicle towards the next maneuver node if you have one set up. Warp 2 will time warp until the point where you should start your burn, and Execute performs this burn. However, this button is not an autopilot. It will just light up the engine and fire it until the planned amount of delta V for the maneuver is spent. In order to have some sort of autopilot style functionality, you will need to activate SES, click Maneuver to orient yourself correctly, click Warp 2 to arrive at the point where the burn needs to happen, and then press Execute at the right time. As for the rest of the buttons, SES activates the stability control, prograde points your vehicle in the forward direction of your current orbit, retrograde does the opposite, normal and anti-normal are used to change inclination, and inward and outward point your spaceship radially towards the center of mass of your orbit or directly away from it. All of this should be familiar to anyone who has played KSP for a little while. Flight plan and info open information windows for your flight plan and for celestial bodies. Orbit toggles the orbit lines on or off. Velocity turns the ship's velocity arrow on and off, which you can see in this video that is a bit older than the latest one. Whew! All that talk and we haven't even seen a single frame of the gameplay video yet. So let's do that right now. And we immediately get a glimpse of what I consider a game changer. This spaceship is supposed to visit the moon, so Dean sets up a maneuver node. And do you notice something? Unlike in the Kerbal games, KSA lets you set maneuver nodes on orbits at any time. There is no dedicated map view. Thanks to how the developers focused on making the game seamless in transitioning between super zoomed out and very much zoomed in, it does not need a separate screen where you can plan your maneuvers or check out where all the other planets in your solar system are. Dean mentions that out of habit he kept pressing the M key to switch to map view like he was used to in KSP. They will probably do some specific zoom levels that can be applied by pressing a key on the keyboard to make transitioning between zoomed out for maneuver nodes and zoomed in for flying your ship quicker. Seeing this was a bit of an eye-opener for me, since for so many years in KSP, KSP2 and other space games like Juno and New Origins, there always was a secondary map view mode where you would plan your maneuvers and could check on other vehicles and their orbits. In KSA, it appears it's all going to be the same single view. Okay, now to the maneuver node interface. As every other UI element in the game at this point, it's still pretty bare bones. For instance, there are no icons to distinguish between prograde, retrograde, normal, anti-normal and inward, outward. It's all just colors, and different ones than what we're used to from KSP. Blue is prograde, retrograde, green is normal, anti-normal, and red is inward, outward. In Kerbal Space Program, these are green, purple and blue. I imagine this is going to throw a couple of veterans for a loop. It certainly confused me when I first saw it. But as stated, all of this is work in progress. We're looking at a real pre-alpha situation, not like the pre-alpha clips we got during KSP2 development that looked very polished, but had a terrible technological foundation, as we found out later. What else can we see here? We can see how long until the maneuver, the amount of delta V needed to perform it, and a button to delete the maneuver. We can also adjust the speed with which the values for each axis are going to change when you pull on them with your mouse, something that was demonstrated in this video not long ago. When we look further outward on the planned orbit, we can see a closest approach indicator, and we see another indicator on the moon's orbit where it is going to be during this approach. Dean realizes in the video that his maneuver is not going to give him an encounter with the moon, so he moves the node forward on the orbit of his spaceship. And we can see new indicators showing us where the vehicle is going to enter the sphere of influence of the moon and where it is going to exit it again. Again, this should all feel very familiar to KSP players. With a click on the Warp 2 button, the simulation time warps forward until it's time to perform the maneuver. Setting SAS to prograde and not to maneuver, the rocket starts firing its engine and you can see the orbit changing. This burn is performed manually and not using the execute button I mentioned earlier. What's not happening, unfortunately, is any indicator how much delta V is still required to complete the planned maneuver, but as I said, everything here is very much work in progress and I would expect this to be added over time. We also don't see any fuel levels changing. I would assume that at this very early time there isn't any resource consumption implemented yet. But if there is, we don't see any visualization for it in the shared gameplay video. While his spaceship travels to the moon, Dean says something interesting.
We've really completely decoupled that simulation from any context of rendering or anything like that.
This is actually another game changer because it means that no matter where your vehicle is, orbit calculations and maneuvers can be performed without having to actively watch the spacecraft all the time. You could have some type of scripting like the mod KOS provides for KSP to perform maneuvers autonomously, and it should all work out in the background even while you're off on a planet jumping rovers off a ledge or something. This is yet another huge improvement Kitten Space Agency will have over KSP, since you have to babysit every maneuver in that game, even when using mods like MacJab, which automatically performs maneuvers as long as the player is watching. In KSA, you could have a fleet of spacecraft performing multiple maneuvers without you having to check in on them all the time. Or you could watch them in a separate window while dealing with your main objective. The bespoke foundation the developers created for the game could in theory allow us to do these things. However, we will have to see how this impacts performance and playability. Back to the mission in the gameplay video. Just like with Kerbal Space Program, entering the sphere of influence of Duna changes the frame of reference automatically. Notice how the camera and Navball change. I've been thinking about this. Is that really a good thing? Or have we just gotten so used to this behavior from more than a decade of experience with Kerbal Space Program? Let me know in the comments what you think about that. Anyway, the vehicle is now oriented retrograde and performs a capture burn to stay in orbit around the moon. While zipping across the surface of the moon, I noticed something weird. In addition to the normal orbit path lines, there was suddenly a line pointing down from the spaceship towards the surface of the moon. I couldn't make heads or tails of it until the developers explained on the KSA Discord server that this was a bug, and since then it apparently was already fixed. Something else that's missing, according to the video's narration, is self-shadowing of the terrain. That is why it looks so flat while the spacecraft is flying closely across the surface. The developers have a few ideas how to improve on that. Again, everything is still very much work in progress. For the return journey to Earth, Dean forgoes the option to use a maneuver node and just performs a manual burn, which results in his spacecraft being on an escape trajectory away from Earth. Probably not what he had desired, but also probably something veteran KSP players can relate to. I know I can. While the spacecraft performs its burn to circularize around the Earth, we can see some graphics glitches. Apparently something happens that cuts into the cloud layer here on our blue marble. Yet more proof that this is far from a finished, polished gaming experience. Speaking of clouds, graphics guru Blackrack, who already did the fantastic Scatterer mod for KSP, implemented some cloud animations in the meantime, making the atmosphere visuals even prettier. And that's basically all we got to see in this gameplay demonstration. In future updates, we will probably see some type of interplanetary mission profile. The developers are currently working on making those easier than they were in KSP, or KSP2 for that matter. With the capability of multiple windows, you could in theory see the effects of what you do to the maneuver node at Earth as far away to the planned orbit around Mars. And I am sure the developers have thought about this and other methods of making interplanetary maneuvers less finicky than they were in the previous space games. Alright, and that's how we squeeze more than twice the time out of a 6-minute gameplay video around here. If you guys have been following my channel since the early days of KSP2 development, you might be familiar with me doing these deep dives. I really enjoy doing that type of content because, at least to me, it's fun to think about all of these things and all the questions that these insights into game development raise. For instance, if the developers would release an alpha build tomorrow, could we only be able to do orbital stuff, or could we already try landing on planets and moons? Are there even colliders on those celestial bodies, or would we simply pass through? Can we only use one spacecraft, or could we spawn multiple? Is the fuel in fact infinite right now, or does it run out at one point? What are the things that would break the game? I am sure guys like Danny2462 would immediately rip into KSA and probably destroy it within 5 minutes. And that's a good thing, because at an early stage of development like this, developers can still pivot and change things more easily than if all the stuff that will be built upon the technical foundation was already there. By the way, since Dean Hall said in the video content creators can do with this gameplay whatever they please, I took the whole 6 minutes, cut out his commentary and put KSP music under it for my people on Patreon and my YouTube members. If you enjoy what I do and want to support me further, you can watch all my recent videos ad-free on Patreon and get early access a few days before the general public if you go for the highest tier. And depending on a selected tier, your name will show up here, together with all of these other wonderful people. As always, thank you so much for your support. After seeing this KSA gameplay video, I really want to get my hands on a build and see what it is capable of already, even if it's going to be in a rough alpha state. We might have lost the Kerbals to corporate greed, but maybe kittens will save the space simulation genre. And before you comment again that you hate cats, as I know some of you do, what if we turned them green? Yes? No? Too Grinchy? Okay, now let me know in the comments what you think. Or just tell me how stupid I am. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel for more and follow me on my social thingies. The links are in the description. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.